The orc girl stood in the mud of the hiring fair with her arms crossed and her jaw set, watching the farmers circle her like crows around carrion. And when the human with the kind eyes and work-worn hands stopped in front of her, she spoke before he could. "I promise nothing." He did not flinch. He did not look disappointed. Instead, he smiled, slow and genuine, the kind of expression that seemed to cost him nothing at all. "Then let me earn your first promise." She did not know what to make of that. His name was Warren Quincy, and he owned a small farm 3 miles west of the crossroads, 40 acres of wheat and barley, and a vegetable garden that fed him through the winter. He needed help. The last hired hand had left 2 weeks ago, and the spring planting was already late. He told her all this in a steady voice while the other farmers drifted away, muttering about orcs and bad luck and the waste of good silver. Her name was Zara. She told him that much and nothing more. No stories about where she came from or why she had scars on her knuckles and a limp in her left leg. No explanations for the way she kept her eyes down when the crowd pressed too close. She was 18, maybe 19. She had lost count somewhere between the last farm and this one. Warren offered her a contract. 6 months, room and board, and a silver piece at the end of each month if the work was good. She read it twice, looking for the trap, but the words were plain and honest. She signed with an X because reading was one thing and writing another. They walked to the farm in silence. The road was dry and dusty, lined with oak trees just beginning to green. Warren carried a sack of seed over one shoulder and a coil of rope over the other. Zara carried nothing but herself. She had learned long ago not to accumulate things she could not run with. The farmhouse was small and weathered, 2 rooms and a loft, with a stone chimney that leaned slightly to the east. The barn was larger, though the roof sagged in the middle. There were chickens in the yard and a pair of plow horses in the pasture, both old enough to have gray around their muzzles. Warren showed her the bunkhouse, a narrow structure attached to the barn. It had a cot, a table, and a small stove. The door latched from the inside. "You will eat with me," he said. "Breakfast at dawn, supper at dusk. I am not much of a cook, but I manage." She nodded. She did not tell him she was used to worse. The work began the next morning. Warren woke her before the sun was up, knocking gently on the bunkhouse door. She dressed quickly and met him in the yard. He handed her a hoe and led her to the southern field, where the soil was dark and rich. They worked side by side, turning the earth, breaking up clods, pulling rocks. Warren moved with the easy rhythm of someone who had done this all his life. Zara matched his pace, though her hands blistered by midday. He noticed but said nothing. At noon, he brought out bread and cheese and a jar of water. They sat in the shade of the wagon and ate without talking. Zara watched him from the corner of her eye. He was older than her, maybe 30, with brown hair that curled at his collar and a beard he kept trimmed short. His hands were scarred like hers. His shoulders were broad, but not in the way of a man who fought, in the way of a man who lifted things. "Why did you hire me?" she asked finally. He looked at her, surprised. "You were the only one still standing in the mud when I got there." "The others left because I am an orc." "I know. So why?" Warren wiped his hands on his trousers. "Because I need help and you need work." Seemed straightforward. She did not believe him, but she did not argue. She had learned that arguing rarely changed anything. The days fell into a pattern. They planted wheat in the southern field and barley in the north. They mended fences and cleared the irrigation ditch. Warren talked while they worked, not in the way of someone who expected answers, but in the way of someone who was used to his own company. He told her about the farm, how it had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that. How he had inherited it 5 years ago when his father died. How he had managed alone until last year when the work became too much. Zara listened. She did not offer stories of her own. At the end of the first week, Warren paid her a quarter silver. She stared at it, confused. "You said a silver at the end of the month." "I did. But I figured you might want something before then. There is a market on 6th Day. You can buy what you need." She closed her hand around the coin. It was warm from his pocket. "I do not need anything." "Then save it," he said, "or spend it on something foolish. It is yours." She did not go to the market. She put the coin in a tin box under her cot and tried not to think about the way he had smiled when he gave it to her. The second week was harder. A late frost came through and killed half the seedlings in the vegetable garden. Warren swore, low and bitter, and spent the afternoon replanting. Zara helped without being asked. Her hands were steadier than his, and she worked quickly, patting the soil down around each fragile stem. When they finished, Warren sat back on his heels and looked at her. "Thank you." She shrugged. "You are paying me." "Not for this. The contract says field work." "The contract says I work." "This is work." He smiled, that same slow smile from the hiring fair, and something in her chest twisted. She ignored it. That night, Warren cooked supper, a stew of salt pork and turnips that was better than she expected. They ate at the table in the main room with the fire crackling in the hearth. Zara sat stiffly, unused to the warmth, unused to the quiet companionship. Warren ate with steady focus, sopping up the last of the stew with a piece of bread. "You can stay, you know," he said suddenly. She looked up. "What, after the 6 months, if you want, I can keep you on." "You do not know if I am any good yet." "You are good," he said. "I can tell." Zara set down her spoon, her throat felt tight. "I told you I promise nothing." "I remember." Warren leaned back in his chair. "But if you change your mind, the offer stands." She did not answer. She finished her stew and washed her bowl and went back to the bunkhouse. She lay on the cot and stared at the ceiling and tried to ignore the fact that she wanted to stay. The third week brought rain. It poured for 3 days straight, turning the fields into mud and the road into a river. Warren and Zara spent the time in the barn, mending harnesses and sharpening tools. The barn was dry and smelled of hay and horses. Warren worked at the bench by the door, and Zara sat on an overturned bucket, stitching a tear in a leather strap. "Where did you learn that?" Warren asked, nodding at her hands. "I worked in a tannery once. 2 seasons." "Why did you leave?" Zara pulled the thread tight. "The owner's son thought I owed him more than work." Warren was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I am sorry." "Do not be. I broke his nose." He laughed, sudden and surprised, and Zara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. On the 4th day, the rain stopped. The sun came out, pale and watery, and the fields began to dry. Warren and Zara went back to work, checking the seedlings, shoring up the places where the irrigation ditch had collapsed. The wheat was doing well, green and strong. The barley was slower, but it would catch up. At the end of the month, Warren paid her the full silver. Zara held it in her palm, feeling the weight of it. She had earned money before, but it had always felt temporary, something that would be taken away. This felt different. This felt like something she had built. "Stay 1 more week," Warren said. She frowned. "The contract is for 6 months. I know. But I am asking you to promise me 1 more week. After that, if you want to leave, you can." Zara looked at him. His eyes were steady, patient. She thought about the way he had given her the quarter silver, the way he had thanked her for replanting the garden, the way he laughed when she told him about breaking the tannery owner's son's nose. She thought about the warmth of the farmhouse and the quiet of the bunkhouse, and the fact that, for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was waiting for the other boot to drop. 1 more week, she said. Warren smiled. "That is a start." The next month was planting season in earnest. They worked from dawn until dusk, their hands black with soil, their backs aching. Warren pushed himself hard, too hard, and Zara saw the way he winced when he thought she was not looking. One evening she found him sitting on the porch steps, his left hand wrapped in a rag. "What did you do?" she asked. "Cut it on the plow blade. It is nothing." Zara knelt in front of him and unwrapped the rag. The cut was deep, running across his palm. It needed stitches. She told him so. "I will be fine," he said. "You will lose the hand if it gets infected," Warren sighed. "I do not have time to go to the village." "Then I will do it." He stared at her. "You know how, I told you. I worked in a tannery. I stitched leather. Skin is not so different." She fetched a needle and thread from the barn and a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen. Warren drank a long swallow and held out his hand. Zara worked quickly, her stitches small and even. Warren did not make a sound, though she saw the way his jaw tightened. When she finished, she wrapped the hand in clean linen and tied it off. "There," she said. "Keep it dry." Warren flexed his fingers carefully. "Thank you. You are paying me," she said, echoing her words from weeks before. "Not for this." She stood and brushed the dirt off her knees. "Then consider it a favor." "I will," Warren said, "and I will owe you one." Zara did not answer. She went back to the bunkhouse and lay on her cot and thought about the way his hand had felt in hers, warm and solid and real. The second month passed. Zara stayed. She did not promise another week, but when Warren asked, she nodded. The wheat grew tall and the barley filled in. The vegetable garden flourished, rows of beans and carrots and onions. The chickens laid eggs and the horses grew fat on spring grass. The farm was thriving. But Warren was struggling. Zara saw it in the way he moved, slow and stiff in the mornings, the way he sometimes sat at the supper table with his head in his hands. One night she asked him what was wrong. "Money," he said simply. "The planting cost more than I expected. And the roof on the barn needs fixing before winter or it will collapse. I do not know if I can manage both." "What will you do?" Warren rubbed his eyes. "Work harder, I suppose. Hope the harvest is good." Zara thought about the silver coins in the tin box under her cot. There were 6 of them now and 2 quarters. Enough to buy a new roof, maybe, or at least the materials for one. She thought about offering, but she did not. The money was hers. She had earned it. She would need it when she left. If she left, the thought startled her. She pushed it away. The third month brought heat. The sun beat down on the fields and the air shimmered with it. Warren and Zara worked in the early mornings and late evenings, resting during the worst of the midday heat. The wheat turned from green to gold. The barley ripened. It would be time to harvest soon. One afternoon, Zara was in the barn, checking the harnesses when she heard voices outside. She looked through a gap in the boards and saw 3 men on horses. They were talking to Warren. She could not hear the words, but she saw the way Warren stood, tense and wary. One of the men dismounted and stepped closer. Warren did not back down. Zara slipped out of the barn and walked toward them. The men turned to look at her. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to disgust. "An orc," one of them said. "I heard you had one, Quincy, but I did not believe it." Warren did not look at Zara. His eyes stayed on the man. "Zara works for me. That is all you need to know. Does the village know? There are rules about bringing monsters into settled lands. She is not a monster. She is a hired hand, and the rules say I can hire who I want." The man sneered. "For now, but people talk, Quincy, and when they talk long enough, they act." "Then let them talk," Warren said. His voice was flat and hard. "Now get off my land." The men exchanged glances. The one who had spoken shrugged and remounted his horse. They rode away slowly, deliberately, kicking up dust. Warren watched them until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Zara. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "Who were they?" neighbors, or they used to be. They have been trying to buy this land for years. My father refused, and so do I." "Because of me?" Warren frowned. "No, because this is my farm and I am not selling." Zara wanted to believe him, but she had heard the venom in the man's voice, the way he had called her a monster. She had seen the way Warren's shoulders had tightened, the way his hand had curled into a fist. She knew what it cost to stand up for an orc. She had seen it before. "I can leave," she said quietly, "if it will make things easier." Warren looked at her for a long moment, then he shook his head. "I do not want you to leave." "Why not?" "Because you are good at this. Because the farm runs better with you here. Because he stopped, took a breath. Because I like having you here." Zara felt something crack open inside her, something she had kept locked and buried for so long she had forgotten it was there. She wanted to tell him she liked being here. She wanted to tell him she did not want to leave, but the words stuck in her throat and all she could manage was a nod. Warren smiled, small and sad. "Stay for supper." "I always do." "I know, but promise me you will, just for tonight." She looked at him, this human man who had hired her when no one else would, who had given her a place to sleep and food to eat and work that made her feel useful, who had asked for nothing but her labor and given her something she had not expected, respect. "I promise," she said. It was the first time she had said those words to him. Warren's face lit up and Zara felt the crack inside her widen. That night, Warren cooked chicken and potatoes and they ate on the porch as the sun set. The air was cooler and the sky was streaked with orange and pink. Zara sat on the steps and watched the light fade. Warren sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Thank you," he said. "For staying. You are paying me, Zara." He said her name gently, like it mattered. "You know it is more than that." She did. She had known for weeks, maybe longer, but knowing and admitting were different things. "I do not know how to do this," she said finally. "Do what? Stay, trust, any of it." Warren was quiet, then he said, "I am not asking you to trust me all at once, just a little at a time." One promise and then another. Zara looked at him. His face was open, honest, and she wanted so badly to believe him. "What if I cannot?" "Then I will wait," Warren said. "As long as it takes." She did not answer. She turned back to the sunset and let the silence settle between them, warm and easy. The 4th month brought trouble. It started with the roof. Warren had been putting off the repairs, trying to stretch the money, but the barn could not wait any longer. One morning, Zara woke to the sound of splintering wood. She ran out of the bunkhouse and saw Warren in the barn staring up at the ceiling. A beam had cracked, and the whole structure was sagging dangerously. "We need to fix this now," he said, "before the whole thing comes down." They spent the next 3 days shoring up the roof. Warren bought timber from the village, using money he did not have, and they worked from dawn until dark, hammering and sawing and hauling. Zara's hands were raw by the end of the first day, but she did not stop. Warren worked beside her, his injured hand still not fully healed, and she saw the way he gritted his teeth against the pain. On the 3rd day, the beam was in place, and the roof was stable. Warren climbed down from the ladder and stood in the yard, looking up at their work. He was exhausted, his face pale and drawn. Zara handed him a cup of water and he drank it in one long swallow. "We did it," he said. "You need to rest." "I will, after supper." But he did not. That night, Zara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She pulled on her boots and ran to the farmhouse. Smoke was pouring from the barn. She shouted for Warren and he appeared in the doorway, already dressed, his eyes wide. "Fire," he said. They ran to the barn. The flames were in the hayloft, climbing the walls, licking at the new beam. Warren grabbed a bucket and ran to the well. Zara followed. They filled bucket after bucket, throwing water on the fire, but it was spreading too fast. The horses were screaming in their stalls. Zara ran inside, ignoring Warren's shout, and led them out one at a time, her eyes streaming from the smoke. The chickens scattered into the yard, clucking frantically. Warren climbed into the loft and started throwing burning hay out the window. Zara joined him, her lungs burning, her hands blistering from the heat. They worked in desperate silence, and slowly, achingly, the fire began to die. By the time the sun rose, the flames were out. The barn was a ruin, half the loft gone, the new beam scorched but intact. Warren stood in the yard, covered in soot, staring at the wreckage. Zara stood beside him. She did not know what to say. "I cannot afford to rebuild," he said quietly. "Not this year." Zara thought about the tin box under her cot. She had been saving that money for herself, for the day when she would leave and need a new start. But looking at Warren, at the exhaustion and despair in his face, she knew what she had to do. "I have money," she said. Warren looked at her. "What?" "The silver you paid me, I saved it. It is not much, but it might be enough for timber." "Zara, no, that is yours. I know." She met his eyes. "But I am giving it to you, for the barn." Warren shook his head. "I cannot take it. You can, and you will. Because if this farm fails, I lose my job, so it is practical." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Warren did not argue. He nodded slowly, and Zara saw the way his throat worked, like he was trying not to cry. "Thank you," he said. She shrugged, trying to make it seem like less than it was. "You will pay me back." "I will," Warren said. "I promise." They rebuilt the barn together. It took 2 weeks, working every spare moment, but by the end of it the structure was sound. The hayloft was smaller and the walls were patched with mismatched boards, but it would hold. Warren paid her back the silver, coin by coin, even though Zara told him not to. She put the money back in the tin box and tried not to think about what it meant that she had given it to him in the first place. The 5th month was harvest time. The wheat was ready, golden and heavy, and they cut it in long, sweeping rows. Warren used the scythe, and Zara gathered the sheaves, tying them with twine. It was back-breaking work, but there was a rhythm to it, a satisfaction. The barley came next, and then the vegetables, carrots and onions and beans that they packed into crates and sold at the market. The harvest was good. Not great, but good enough. Warren counted the money one night, sitting at the kitchen table, and when he looked up at Zara, he was smiling. "We did it," he said. "We are going to make it through the winter." Zara felt something loosen in her chest. Warren blinked. "I mean, if you stay, I know the contract is almost up, but I would like you to stay if you want." She did want. She had wanted for weeks, maybe months, but she had been too afraid to admit it. Too afraid that wanting something meant it would be taken away. "I will stay 1 more month," she said. Warren's smile faded a little, but he nodded. 1 more month. They worked through the rest of the harvest, storing grain in the barn, preserving vegetables for the winter. The days grew shorter, and the nights grew cold. Zara found herself spending more time in the farmhouse, sitting by the fire with Warren, talking about nothing and everything. He told her about his childhood, about learning to farm from his father, about the year the river flooded and they lost everything. She told him about the tannery, about the farm she had worked before this one, about the way people looked at her when they saw her tusks. "I do not care what they think," Warren said one night. "I never have. You should. It makes your life harder, maybe, but it is my life. And I would rather live it the way I want than worry about what the neighbors think." Zara looked at him, this man who had taken a chance on her, who had treated her like a person instead of a monster. She wanted to tell him how much that meant, but the words were still stuck, locked behind years of disappointment and betrayal. "Stay," Warren said quietly. "Not for 1 more month." "For good." Zara's heart was pounding. "I do not know if I can." "Why not?" "Because I do not know how to stay. Every time I've tried, something goes wrong. Someone decides I am not worth the trouble, or I am too much trouble, or I am just trouble. Warren reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, rough with calluses. You are not trouble, Zara. You are the best thing that has happened to this farm in years, the best thing that has happened to me. She stared at their joined hands. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to run. But more than that, she wanted to stay. I will think about it, she said. Warren nodded. He did not push. He never did. The 6th month ended on a cold, clear day. Warren paid Zara her final silver, and she put it in the tin box with the others. She had more money now than she had ever had in her life. Enough to start over somewhere new. Enough to buy her own piece of land, maybe, or a place in a city where no one knew her, but she did not want to leave. She realized it the next morning, waking in the bunkhouse and watching the sun rise through the small window. She realized it when she walked to the farmhouse and saw Warren in the kitchen, making breakfast. She realized it when he smiled at her and handed her a plate of eggs and bread, and she felt the warmth of the fire and the warmth of his presence, and she knew she could not walk away. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set. The harvest was done, and the farm was ready for winter. The barn was full of grain, and the root cellar was stocked with vegetables. The chickens were fat and the horses were healthy. It had been a hard season, but they had made it through. I have been thinking, Zara said. Warren looked at her. About what? About staying. His face went very still. And Zara took a breath. You said you would earn my first promise, and you did. You earned it when you hired me. You earned it when you paid me fairly. You earned it when you stood up to those men. You earned it when you let me fix your hand, and when you trusted me with the horses during the fire, and when you did not ask me to leave even when it would have been easier. Warren was quiet, waiting. So I am giving it to you, Zara said. My first real promise. I will stay. For good. If you still want me, Warren's eyes were bright. I want you. I have wanted you since the day I met you. Zara felt her throat tighten. I fell first, weeks ago, maybe months. I just did not want to admit it. Why not? Because falling means trusting. And trusting means you can be hurt. Warren reached for her hand, and she let him take it. I will not hurt you, Zara. I promise. She looked at him, this man who had been patient and kind and steady, who had given her a place to belong. She thought about all the promises she had made to herself, all the walls she had built, all the times she had run because running was easier than staying. I know, she said. That is why I am staying. Warren smiled, and it was the kind of smile that felt like sunlight, warm and bright and real. He leaned forward, hesitant, and Zara met him halfway. The kiss was soft and careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile, but when they pulled apart, Zara felt whole in a way she never had before. So what now? She asked. Warren laughed. Now we plan for spring, and summer, and all the seasons after that. Together, Warren said. If that is what you want, Zara nodded. It is. They sat on the porch as the stars came out, and Zara felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but the steady, solid kind that came from knowing she had found a place where she belonged. The winter was long and cold, but the farmhouse was warm. Warren and Zara spent the evenings by the fire, mending tools and planning for the next planting season. They talked about expanding the vegetable garden, about buying a milk cow, about all the small, ordinary dreams that made up a life. Zara learned to cook, and Warren learned to braid her hair when it got in her way during chores. They worked together, ate together, and slowly, carefully, built a life together. In the spring, they planted again. The wheat and barley went into the ground, and the vegetable garden was twice the size it had been the year before. Zara worked with a lightness she had never felt, and Warren watched her with a smile that never seemed to fade. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Warren pulled something from his pocket. It was a ring, simple and silver, with a small green stone. "I know we have not talked about this," he said, "but I want to. I want you to be my wife, Zara, not just my partner on the farm, but my partner in everything." Zara stared at the ring. She had never thought about marriage, never let herself imagine a future that permanent. But looking at Warren, at the hope and love in his eyes, she realized she wanted it. She wanted all of it. "Yes," she said. "I promise." Warren slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. They were married in the fall, a small ceremony in the village with a handful of witnesses. Some of the neighbors did not come, but others did. People who had seen the way Warren and Zara worked together, the way they had saved the farm and made it thrive. The priest was kind, and the vows were simple. Zara wore a dress that Warren had bought for her, green like her skin, and Warren wore his best shirt, the one without any patches. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Zara felt tears on her cheeks. She had not cried in years, but these were good tears, the kind that came from joy instead of pain. They went back to the farm that night, and Warren carried her over the threshold, laughing when she protested that she was too heavy. They spent the evening by the fire, talking about the future, about the life they would build together. Zara leaned against Warren's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, and she felt safe in a way she had never felt before. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The farm grew, and so did their family. Zara gave birth to a daughter in the spring, a tiny, fierce thing with green skin and her father's eyes. They named her Willa, and she was the light of their lives. 2 years later, a son came, smaller and quieter with his mother's determination. They named him Miles. Zara learned to be a mother the same way she had learned to be a wife, carefully, patiently, with Warren by her side. She taught her children to work the land, to respect the soil and the seasons. Warren taught them to read and write, to be kind and fair. Together, they raised their children to be strong and compassionate, to see people for who they were instead of what they looked like. The neighbors who had sneered at Zara in the beginning slowly came around. Some never did, but others saw the way she and Warren built their life, the way their farm flourished, the way their children grew up happy and healthy. Respect was earned slowly, but it was earned. One evening, many years later, Zara and Warren sat on the porch as the sun set. Their children were grown, Willa married to a blacksmith in the village and Miles running a farm of his own a few miles south. The farmhouse was quiet, but it was a good quiet, the kind that came from a life well lived. "You remember the day we met?" Warren asked. Zara smiled. "I told you I promised nothing, and I told you I would earn your first promise." "You did," Zara said. She took his hand, worn and scarred like hers. "You earned all of them." Warren kissed her, soft and slow, and Zara felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt all those years ago. She had spent so much of her life running, afraid to stay, afraid to trust. But Warren had taught her that staying was not a weakness. It was a choice, and it was the best choice she had ever made. They sat together as the stars came out, and Zara thought about all the promises she had made. To stay, to trust, to love, to build a life. And she thought about all the promises still to come, the quiet, ordinary promises that made up a marriage, a family, a home. She had promised nothing once. But now she promised everything, and she had never been happier. The harvest that year was the best they had ever had. The wheat was tall and golden, and the barley was thick and strong. The vegetable garden overflowed with carrots and beans and onions, more than they could eat or sell. Warren and Zara worked side by side, cutting and gathering and storing, and when the work was done, they invited the neighbors for a harvest supper. The porch was crowded with people, some who had been there from the beginning and some who had come around later. There was laughter and music, and the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air. Zara moved through the crowd, pouring cider and slicing pie, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Warren found her as the evening was winding down. He took her hand and led her to the edge of the porch, away from the noise and the crowd. The stars were bright overhead and the air was cool and crisp. "Thank you," he said. Zara frowned. "For what?" "For staying. For building this life with me. For giving me everything I never knew I needed." Zara felt her eyes sting. "You gave me the same." Warren pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They stood there in the quiet, listening to the sounds of the party behind them, and Zara thought about how far she had come. From the girl who promised nothing to the woman who had built a life full of promises kept. "I love you," she said. Warren kissed the top of her head. "I love you too." They stayed there for a long time, wrapped in each other in the night, and when they finally went back inside, the party was still going strong. Zara sat at the table with Warren beside her, and she looked around at the people who had become her friends, her family, her community. She thought about the farm, thriving and strong. She thought about her children, grown and happy. She thought about the man beside her, who had taken a chance on an orc girl with nothing to offer but her labor, and who had given her everything in return. She had promised nothing once, but she had earned everything. And as the night wore on, filled with laughter and warmth and love, Zara knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, home.